King of Criminal Moscow, the true story of Sergei Timofeev, Silvester. A tremendous explosion shattered the evening silence of the capital. The force was such that the shockwave blew out windows within a 200-meter radius. Flames shot up to the height of a 5-story building. September 13th, 1994. Moscow, Bolshaya Polyanka Street. Exactly at 7:47 p.m. At the epicenter of the explosion was an armored Mercedes 600 with reinforced flooring and bulletproof glass. Inside the car was a man called the King of Criminal Moscow, Sergei Timofeev, known in the criminal world by the nickname Silvester. All that remained of the automobile was a twisted heap of metal. Experts determined 8 to 15 kilograms of TNT had been planted under the car. This wasn't just a terrorist attack, it was the end of an entire era. But who was this man? How did a simple Novgorod tractor driver become one of the most influential criminal authorities in Russia? And most importantly, why are there still so many mysteries surrounding his biography and death? This is not a story for the faint-hearted. The story of a man who in 10 years went from a working-class guy to the shadow master of the capital. A story that many would prefer to forget. Chapter 1. Birth of a Legend. Sergei the Tractor Driver. Novgorod Roots. Sergei Ivanovich Timofeev was born on June 17, 1963, in Veliki Novgorod. An ordinary Soviet family, an ordinary Soviet boy. His father worked at a factory. His mother was a nurse at the city hospital. Nothing foretold that this guy would become one of the most sinister figures of the criminal 90s. At school, Sergei was a mediocre student. Not a hooligan, but not an honor student either. Friends remembered him as a strong guy with iron fists and cold calculation. Already in adolescence, qualities emerged that would later make him a leader. The ability to negotiate, absence of fear before stronger opponents, and natural savvy. After 8th grade, as was customary in those times, Timofeev enrolled in vocational school to become a tractor driver. There was little romance in this profession: dirt, diesel fuel, heavy physical labor. But it was here, among guys from working families just like him, that Sergei began to form his first collective. Army training. In 1981, at age 18, Timofeev was drafted into the army. He served in the tank forces somewhere in Belarus. Fellow soldiers remembered, the guy was tough but fair. He didn't let anyone hurt his own, but didn't go looking for trouble without reason either. The army gave Sergei 2 important things: discipline and understanding of hierarchy. He saw how the vertical of power worked, how subordination and authority were linked together. These lessons he would apply later, creating one of the most organized criminal groups in Russia. He was demobilized in 1983. He returned to Novgorod a different person, tougher, more purposeful. And most importantly, with the understanding that working as a tractor driver for 120 rubles a month was not his path. First steps into crime. Mid-80s, the USSR is living its final years. The country is beginning to fall apart. The old system is crumbling, the new one hasn't been created yet. It's precisely at this moment that opportunities appear in the shadow world for those who aren't afraid to take risks. Timofeev started small. Fartsovka, black market trading, speculation in scarce goods, jeans, cassettes, imported cosmetics. Small stuff compared to what would come later, but these were the first steps. Sergei quickly understood. The main thing isn't the goods, but connections and protection. By 1986, a small group had gathered around Timofeev, about 10 Novgorod guys just like him. They controlled several trading points at markets, protected speculators, resolved conflicts. Nothing large-scale, but this was already an organization. It was then that Sergei received his nickname, Silvester. According to one version, because of his love for American action movies with Stallone. According to another, because of his resemblance to the actor. The same athletic build, strong-willed face, hard gaze. The nickname stuck. Turning point. Move to Moscow. 1988 was a pivotal year. Silvester understood. In Novgorod, the ceiling was low. Real money, real power. It was all in Moscow. And he made a decision that would change his fate and the fates of thousands of people. Moving to the capital with a group of 8 to 10 people. Little money, no connections. But there were ambitions and readiness to go all the way. Silvester chose the Orekhovo-Borisovo district in southeast Moscow as his base. A residential area, panel high-rises, working people, an ideal place to start. The first months were difficult. Moscow is not Novgorod. Local groups were already running things here. Solntsevskaya, Lubertsy, Bauman. Outsiders weren't liked, but Silvester didn't back down. He acted smartly, didn't immediately interfere in others' business, looked for free niches. They started with guarding cooperatives. In the late 80s, there were many of them, and all needed a roof. Timofeev offered reliable protection for reasonable percentages. His reputation grew. By the end of 1989, the Orekhovo Group, as they began to be called after their base district, controlled about 30 retail outlets and several small enterprises. But this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Rise. The Orekhovo Empire. 1991. Year of changes. The collapse of the USSR opened unprecedented opportunities. The old control system collapsed, the KGB lost its grip, the militia was demoralized. Wild privatization began. State property worth billions went for pennies. And who controlled this process? Those who had money and force support. Silvester found himself in the right place at the right time. He already had an organization, about 50 to 60 fighters tested in action. He had a reputation as a tough but fair resolver. And most importantly, he had brains. Timofeev didn't limit himself to primitive racketeering. He built a system. The Orekhovo Group began to legitimize, opened private security companies, shops, firms, stores. On the surface, everything looked legal, but behind the scenes, a well-oiled criminal machine was working. Organization structure. By 1992, the Orekhovo OCG, Organized Criminal Group, had become one of the largest in Moscow. According to MVD estimates, it included from 150 to 200 active fighters, plus several hundred sleepers, people who worked in legal positions but were ready to help when necessary. The structure was clear, almost military. First circle, Silvester himself and his closest associates, Nikolai Zakharov, Zyama, Dmitry Belyaev, Belly, Igor Sibiryakov, Sibir. This was headquarters, planning, strategy, income distribution. Second circle, brigade leaders. Each controlled a specific direction. Someone was responsible for roofing business, someone for debt collection, someone for force protection. There were 5 to 6 such brigades in total, each with 20 to 30 people. Third circle, rank and file fighters. Young, strong guys ready to carry out orders. Many came from sports, boxers, wrestlers, karate practitioners. Silvester understood the value of physically trained personnel. Fourth circle, watchers and informants. People in the militia, prosecutor's office, tax authorities, banks. They warned about inspections, leaked information about competitors, helped resolve issues quietly. Sources of income. Where did the money come from? There were many sources. Roofing businesses, classic 90s. Any entrepreneur opening a store, cafe, or factory in the Orekhovo sphere of influence had to pay tribute, usually 10 to 30% of profit. In return, they received protection from competitors and help in solving problems. Market control. Cherkizovsky, Luzhniki, several smaller ones. Markets spun huge money. Traders paid for places, for security, for conflict resolution. Control of one large market brought up to $1 million a month. Gambling business. Casinos, slot machines. In the early 90s, this was a gold mine. People gambled away apartments, cars, last savings. The Orekhovo group controlled several casinos in Moscow. Drug trafficking. Although Silvester publicly disavowed drug dealing, this was considered a dirty business in thieves' concepts. According to MVD data, the group participated in heroin transit from Central Asia. Contract killings, the darkest direction. The Orekhovo group was famous for professionalism in eliminating undesirables. The price, from $10,000 to $100,000, depending on the target. Participation in privatization, the most profitable. Silvester and his people helped the right people get tasty pieces of state property, receiving a share or monetary reward. According to experts, the monthly income of the Orekhovo OCG by 1993 was from $3 to $5 million. Huge money, especially for that time. But money is only half the battle. Silvester understood. To hold power, you need a roof at the very top. And there was such a roof. According to investigation data, the Orekhovo group had access to GUVD Moscow employees. Several colonels received regular gifts. Moscow City Council deputies, City Hall officials, especially those responsible for privatization and license issuance, businessmen close to the Kremlin. Moreover, there were persistent rumors, though not documented, about connections with the FSB. Allegedly, some Orekhovo operations were coordinated with special services in exchange for information about other groups and help in resolving delicate issues. Whether this is true or not is difficult to say, but the fact remains, Silvester remained untouchable for a long time, despite numerous evidence of his criminal activity. Chapter 3. Wars. Bloody Moscow. Redistribution of spheres of influence. Moscow in the early 90s wasn't a city, it was a battlefield. Dozens of groups divided the capital into zones of influence, and clashes were inevitable. The Orekhovo group began expansion. Silvester wanted to control all of southeast Moscow and enter the center. But other players stood in his way. Conflict with the Solntsevskaya OCG. The Solntsevo group, one of the oldest and most powerful groups in Moscow. They controlled the western districts and weren't going to share. The leader, Sergei Mikhailov, Mikaz, was an experienced and cunning opponent. The first clashes began in 1991 over control of the car market in Luzhniki. Both groups claimed to roof the traders. The conflict escalated into a series of shootouts. The loudest episode, the shooting at the Tropicana restaurant in February 1992. A group of Solntsevo fighters raided the establishment where one of the Orekhovo brigade leaders was celebrating his birthday. Automatic bursts, 4 dead, 7 wounded. Miraculously, none of the visitors were hurt. The response followed 2 weeks later. The Orekhovo group set fire to a warehouse belonging to the Solntsevo group. Losses, about $1 million. The war threatened to get out of control. And then the thieves-in-law intervened, shadow arbiters of the criminal world. A meeting was organized in the Moscow region. Silvester and Mikaz sat at the same table, discussed territorial division. They agreed. Luzhniki remains a neutral zone. Each group gets its share. Solntsevo, west and southwest. Orekhovo, southeast and partially center. A temporary truce was reached. Bauman OCG, war to the death. If they managed to come to terms with Solntsevo, then with Bauman everything was much worse. The Bauman OCG controlled central Moscow districts and was known for particular cruelty. The leader, Andrei Isayev, Bon, was a direct competitor to Silvester. Both young, ambitious, both wanted to be first. Compromise was impossible. The conflict flared up over the Metelitsa casino on New Arbat. The establishment brought fabulous money, up to $300,000 a month. Bauman considered the casino theirs. Orekhovo also claimed it. In March 1993, what would later be called the Metelitsa massacre occurred. A group of Orekhovo fighters burst into the casino and opened fire. 3 guards killed, 5 wounded. Visitors panicked and rushed to the exits. The attackers fled, taking the day's proceeds, about $50,000. Bauman swore revenge, and the revenge was terrible. On April 10, 1993, Nikolai Zakharov, Zyama, was killed in the entrance of his house, one of Silvester's closest associates, the second man in the Orekhovo hierarchy. The killers waited for him at the elevator. 5 shots to the head and chest. Professional work. This was a blow below the belt. Zyama wasn't just an associate. He was Silvester's friend from Novgorod times. Timofeev swore revenge. A real war began. From April to September 1993, 17 people connected to the 2 groups were killed in Moscow. They shot on streets, in courtyards, in restaurants. The militia was powerless. The culmination was the car bombing of one of the Bauman authorities in July 1993. Explosives were planted under the bottom. The car was torn to pieces. The driver died on the spot. The war exhausted both sides. Arbiters intervened again. In September 1993, a truce was reached. The Metelitsa casino was recognized as a neutral zone, income divided in half. But blood enmity remained. Silvester and Bon hated each other. And many believe that it was Bauman who was behind Timofeev's subsequent murder. The Chechen Connection. A separate chapter, relations with Chechen groups. In the early 90s, Chechens were actively developing Moscow. They were cruel, fearless, and well-armed. Silvester understood, an open war with Chechens would lead to huge losses. Therefore, he chose a different tactic, agreements and demarcation of spheres of influence. An agreement was reached. Chechens control the central market and part of the weapons market, Orekhovo, doesn't interfere in their territory. In return, Chechens don't touch Orekhovo business. This was an unpopular decision among Silvester's fighters. Many believed you couldn't yield to Chechens. But Timofeev was a pragmatist. He understood. A war on 2 fronts, with Bauman and Chechens simultaneously, could be fatal. And he was right. While other groups exterminated each other in wars with Chechens, Orekhovo strengthened their positions in other spheres. Chapter 4. Lifestyle, the King and His Kingdom. Luxury and Conspiracy. By 1993, Silvester was one of the richest people in criminal Moscow. His personal fortune was estimated at $20 to $30 million. But Timofeev didn't flaunt his wealth. Unlike many new Russians who wore gold chains and drove bright Mercedes, Silvester preferred to stay in the shadows. Dressed modestly, jeans, leather jacket, no showing off. Changed cars constantly to avoid becoming an easy target. Officially, Timofeev was listed as director of the CHOP Orek. Salary on paper, $500 a month. Paid taxes regularly. Formally, everything was clean. But real life, of course, was different. Several apartments in Moscow, registered to fronts. A country house in the Moscow region. Accounts in foreign banks. Family. Silvester's personal life was shrouded in mystery. Officially, he wasn't married, had no children, but those close knew. There was a common-law wife, Ludmila, with whom he lived since 1990. Ludmila didn't know about Sergei's affairs, or rather, preferred not to know. He presented himself as a businessman, owner of a security company. She worked as an accountant in an ordinary firm, led a modest lifestyle. Timofeev carefully separated family from the criminal world. Ludmila never appeared at parties, didn't know Sergei's associates, lived in a separate apartment. This was a security measure. Enemies shouldn't know where his vulnerable spot was. Circle and leisure. Silvester's inner circle, 5 to 6 people, tested over the years. With them he could relax, discuss business, rest. Favorite places, elite restaurants of Moscow. Golden, Il Patio, Slavyansky Bazaar. A table was always reserved in the far corner, back to the wall. A bandit habit, allowing you to see everyone entering. Dinners were held on a grand scale. The most expensive food, cognac at $500 a bottle, caviar by the kilogram. But Silvester drank moderately, never lost control of himself, loved the bathhouse. Almost every week he rented the VIP zone at one of Moscow's bathhouses. There, in the steam room, among clouds of steam, important issues were resolved, deals discussed, conflicts resolved. Was into boxing. In his youth he competed in amateur competitions, maintained form, regularly went to the gym. Physical strength was important to him. Authority in the criminal world rests not only on money, but also on the ability to stand up for oneself. Concepts and code. Silvester lived by concepts, unwritten laws of the criminal world. For him, this wasn't empty words. Word above all. If he promised, he had to fulfill. Even to enemies. This created a reputation as a reliable business partner. Justice. Silvester never wronged his own. Income was divided fairly, percentages to each according to rank. This ensured loyalty. Cruelty to enemies. He never forgave traitors and rats. Punishment was swift and demonstrative. This created fear. Respect for elders. To thieves in law, authorities from the zone, Timofeev always showed respect. This gave him support in the criminal community. Paradoxically, it was precisely by observing concepts that Silvester was able to build such a powerful organization. People knew, you can deal with him, he won't cheat, won't betray. Chapter 5. Decline, 1994, the last year of life. Warning signs. 1994 began ominously. Silvester felt something was changing. Pressure intensified from several sides at once. From the authorities, the new head of Moscow GUVD, General Kulikov, began a tough fight against organized crime. Arrangements with militia began working worse. Arrests began among Orekhovo. From competitors, Solntsevo and Bauman united against a common enemy. There were rumors of an assassination attempt being prepared. From his own, tensions began within the group. Not everyone was satisfied with Silvester's leadership. Young, ambitious brigade leaders wanted more power and money. In February 1994, the first assassination attempt was made on Silvester. Car shooting on Varshavskoye Highway. Bulletproof glass held. Timofeev wasn't hurt, but the signal was clear. They were targeting him. Security was strengthened. Silvester began changing routes, cars, meeting places, became more cautious, even paranoid. Operation Orek. In spring 1994, the MVD began an operation to liquidate the Orekhovo OCG. More than 200 operatives were involved in the development. Round-the-clock surveillance, wiretapping, evidence collection. In June, the first arrests were made. Several brigade leaders were detained, weapons and documents seized. But Silvester couldn't be taken. He went deep underground. Timofeev understood time was working against him. Sooner or later, they'd get him. He needed either to negotiate or flee the country. According to some data, Silvester tried to enter negotiations with authorities through intermediaries, offered information about competitors in exchange for immunity, but no response followed. Then the escape option was considered. Israel, Germany, or Spain, countries where he could hide.
He had money, documents too. But Silvester hesitated. Abandon the empire he'd built for 6 years? This was beyond his strength. And this indecision destroyed him. September 13th, 1994, the last day. The morning was overcast. Silvester spent the night at a safe house in southwest Moscow, slept poorly, tormented by bad premonitions. Around noon, one of the watchers from militia called, warned, a raid was being prepared on a safe house in the southeast. Need to urgently warn the guys. Silvester decided to go himself. Took only the driver, Mikhail Yakovlev, a loyal man who had served him for 4 years. They chose an armored Mercedes 600, the most protected car available. Reinforced armored bottom, bulletproof glass, doors like a tank. They left around 7 p.m. Route, Lomonosov Prospect, then along University Prospect to Bolshaya Polyanka. The usual route, tested dozens of times. Evening Moscow, traffic jams, car horns, people hurrying home. No one paid attention to the black Mercedes. Bolshaya Polyanka, 7:47 p.m. The car was moving slowly in traffic. And then... Chapter 6. The Explosion. End of an Era. Seconds before catastrophe. A witness who wished to remain anonymous later told investigators, I was walking on the sidewalk, returning from work. I saw a black Mercedes. It was moving slowly, about 20 to 30 meters ahead of me. And suddenly, the sky lit up. Such a roar that my ears were blocked. The shockwave knocked me off my feet. I fell on the asphalt, covered my head with my hands. When I raised my eyes, there was flame where the car had been. 5 meters high, no less. The heat was such that it was felt even at a distance. The smell of burning, smoke, something burnt. People screamed, ran in different directions. Someone lay on the ground, hit by shrapnel. Windows flew out of nearby houses. Car alarms howled. I ran closer. Of the Mercedes remained a pile of mangled metal. Everything was burning. The interior, tires, even the asphalt around. I understood immediately. Whoever was there, they're already dead. Investigation. All emergency services arrived at the explosion site. Militia cordoned off the area. Firefighters extinguished the flames. Ambulances took away those wounded by shrapnel. Experts began work. The picture gradually became clear. Explosive device, Homemade bomb with power from 8 to 15 kilograms of TNT. Planted under the car's bottom, probably on magnets. Detonation method, remotely, by radio signal. Someone was watching the car and pressed the button at the right moment. Installation location. Most likely the bomb was installed during night parking. The car was parked in the courtyard of a house on Lomonosov Prospect. There was no guard. Silvester considered this apartment secret. Bodies were extracted only by midnight. Identification was difficult. Remains were burned and mutilated by the explosion. Identities of the deceased were established from documents that miraculously survived and later confirmed by DNA examination. Officially, 2 people were in the car, Sergei Timofeev and Mikhail Yakovlev. Both died instantly. Funeral. Farewell to the King. September 17, 1994. Bugunkova Cemetery, Moscow. Thousands of people came to say goodbye to Silvester. Eyewitness description. I'd never seen anything like it. Half of criminal Moscow gathered. Mercedes, BMWs, Jeeps. There were so many cars they stood 3 rows deep for a kilometer along the cemetery. Men in black suits, all with ties. Hard faces, many with scars, tattoos. I recognized famous faces, authorities from different groups. Even Silvester's enemies came, a tribute of respect. They carried the coffin by hand, expensive, polished, with gilding. The lid was closed. They said the body was burned, couldn't be shown. Music played, something classical, funereal. Women cried. Lyudmila, the common-law wife, all in black, held herself together. Didn't wail like the others. Only tears flowed silently.
There were many speeches. They spoke of Silvester as fair, honest, strong. He was a real man. He kept his word. He didn't abandon his own. No one mentioned how many people he killed or ordered killed. They lowered the coffin into the grave. They gave a salute, automatic bursts into the air. Militia stood at a distance, didn't interfere. They understood, better not to get involved. They put up a monument later, granite, expensive, a full-length photo in a suit. Inscription: Sergei Ivanovich Timofeev, 1963 to 1994. We remember, we love, we grieve. The grave became a pilgrimage site. People come even now, 30 years later. They lay flowers, leave a bottle of cognac. The legend doesn't die. Chapter 7. Mysteries and Versions. Who ordered Silvester? Official version. The investigation worked for several years. Many versions were put forward, but they didn't come to a definitive conclusion. Official version number 1. Criminal competitors. The Bauman OCG. The most obvious version. Blood feud. Repeated assassination attempts from both sides. Bauman had motive and capabilities. But there was no evidence. All suspects denied involvement. The customer couldn't be identified. Official version number 2. Internal conflict. Someone from Orekhovo decided to remove the leader and take his place. In the criminal world, this is common practice. Several brigade leaders were suspected who could claim power. But again, zero evidence. Official version number 3. Order from the authorities. The most conspiratorial. Allegedly, Silvester was killed by special services because he knew too much about connections between crime and power. This version was actively discussed in the press, but the investigation dismissed it. Not a single fact confirming government involvement. Unofficial versions and rumors. And here's where it gets most interesting. What was whispered about but never made it into official documents. Version number 4.
Chechen connection. After the collapse of the USSR, Chechen groups strengthened their positions in Moscow. Silvester controlled tasty pieces that Chechens wanted to take. According to rumors, there was an ultimatum. Either Silvester leaves the markets voluntarily, or he'll be removed. Timofeev refused. Result? Explosion on Polyanka. Indirect confirmation. After Silvester's death, many Orekhovo objects came under Chechen control. Version number 5. Betrayal from the inner circle. Someone from his own leaked information about the route and car. Otherwise, how to explain that the bomb was planted on exactly that car and exactly that night? Names were mentioned. One of the brigade leaders allegedly made a deal with Baumann, received $200,000 for betrayal, and a position in the new structure. But this person disappeared immediately after Silvester's funeral. Some say fled abroad. Others that Orekhovo found him and buried him somewhere in the forest near Moscow. Version number 6. Order from oligarchs. In 1994, the era of oligarchs began. Big business wanted to monopolize criminal roofs, create a manageable system, and Silvester was too independent. According to this version, the order was paid for by several large businessmen close to power. Executors were professional killers from former special forces. There's no confirmation, but many believe it. Version number 7. FSB and cleanup. The darkest version. Allegedly, the FSB began an operation to clean up criminal authorities of the 90s. They eliminated those who knew a lot about corruption and power. Silvester was one of the first on the list. After him followed others: Yaponchik, Kvantrishvili, Listyev, journalist investigating connections between crime and power. Conspiracy theorists actively promote this version, but again, not a single document, not a single testimony. What we know for sure. Only one thing is known for certain. The murder was professional. The executors knew which car Silvester used, where it was parked at night, which route he would take. The bomb was planted expertly, so that even armor wouldn't help. It detonated at the right second, when the car was in motion, but far from other people, to minimize casualties and not attract unnecessary attention. The customer wasn't found. The executors weren't found. The case officially remains under investigation to this day, but has been stalled for 30 years. Chapter 8. After Silvester. Collapse of the Empire. War for the inheritance. The death of a leader always means redistribution of power, and the Orekhovo OCG was no exception. Immediately after the funeral, squabbling began. Several brigade leaders claimed the throne. Each pulled the blanket to themselves. Dmitry Belyaev, Belly, was considered the unofficial successor. Was Silvester's deputy, knew all the business. But he lacked charisma and toughness. Igor Sibiryakov, Sibir, the toughest of the brigade leaders, controlled the combat wing, wanted power, but even his own were afraid of him. Viktor Novoselov, a schemer and diplomat, good connections in power, knew how to negotiate, but weak in a fight. A war began within the group. From October 1994 to March 1995, 8 people from Orekhovo were killed, all in power struggles. In the end, collective wisdom prevailed. They agreed on a triumvirate: Belly, responsible for strategy; Sibir for security; Novoselov for connections with authorities. But this was no longer that organization. Without Silvester, without his will and authority, Orekhovo began to lose positions. Advance of the authorities. After Silvester's murder, authorities became active. A course was taken to defeat the Orekhovo OCG. 1995 to 1997. Arrests, searches, seizures. Dozens of fighters went to prison. Property worth millions of dollars frozen. Belly got 15 years for organizing murders. Sibir, 12 years for extortion and illegal weapons possession.
Novislav fled abroad, declared internationally wanted. By 2000, the Orekhovo OCG as an organization ceased to exist. Individual groups remained, but there's no former influence. Silvester's legacy. What remained after Timofeev? In the criminal world, a legend. They speak of Silvester as one of the smartest and most successful authorities of the 90s. His methods are studied, his mistakes analyzed. In society, ambiguous memory. For some, he's a bandit and killer. For others, a strong personality who was able to rise from the very bottom. In culture, many films, books, songs. Brigade, Bandit Petersburg, though about St. Petersburg, but much is taken from Silvester's biography. Chanson singers write songs about the King of Moscow. The grave at Vagankovo is still well maintained. People come, lay flowers, some from memory, some from curiosity. Epilogue. More than 30 years have passed since that explosion on Bolshaya Polyanka, but there are still more questions than answers. Who ordered Silvester's murder? Competitors? His own? The authorities? We don't know. Why isn't the case solved? No evidence? Or is someone very influential interested in the truth not surfacing? Did Silvester really die in that car? Officially, yes. But rumors that the funeral was a performance and Timofeev is alive and hiding abroad haven't subsided to this day. Of course, these are just rumors. Experts confirmed Timofeev and Yakovlev died in the car. DNA examination doesn't lie. But then why was the case classified? Why are many documents still marked top secret? What's there that the people shouldn't know? Maybe Silvester's connections went so high that their disclosure would undermine trust in the authorities. Maybe he really worked for special services and they removed him when he became dangerous. Or is it just an ordinary bandit murder and everything else is speculation and conspiracy theories? We don't know. And it seems we'll never know. The story of Sergei Timofeev is the story of a man who in 10 years went from tractor driver to king of criminal Moscow and died before reaching 32 years old. This is the story of an era, the cruel 90s, when one country was collapsing and another was being born. When in the vacuum of power, the masters became people with automatic weapons and suitcases of money. This is a story that still stirs minds, because it has everything: drama, blood, money, power, betrayal, and mystery. And as long as at least one person remembers the explosion on Bolshaya Polyanka, the legend of Silvester will live. Chapter 9. Dark Sides of the Empire. What was hidden from society? Intimidation methods. What wasn't customary to speak about aloud, the real working methods of Orekhovo. Behind the beautiful facades of security companies and legal firms hid a machine of violence. Kidnappings and torture, standard practice for working with debtors. A person who didn't pay tribute, or roof, was first warned, then visited and explained more convincingly. If that didn't help, kidnapped. A former Orekhovo fighter who agreed to testify in 1995, name not disclosed for security reasons, told, "There was a safe house on the outskirts of Moscow. They brought the stubborn ones there, tied them up, sat them on a chair. First, they talked nicely. Pay the debt, and everything will be fine. Didn't help. They started working. Beat professionally. Not in the face. Traces are noticeable. Kidneys, liver, ribs. Broke fingers with pliers.
burned with cigarettes. Some were stripped naked and put on the balcony in winter. After an hour, the person was ready to agree to anything, just to make them stop. Killed rarely. A corpse. That's problems, investigation, noise. Better to intimidate so that he gives everything himself and is still afraid to complain. And it worked. People paid, kept silent, were afraid. According to MVD data, from 1991 to 1994, about 300 complaints about extortion and beatings were received about Orekhovo. Only 50 cases were opened, and not one reached court. Witnesses refused to testify, fearing revenge. Drug trade, officially. Silvester was against drug trafficking. In concepts, this was considered dirty business, unworthy of a thief. But in practice, in 1993, a courier was detained with 5 kilograms of heroin. During interrogation, he confessed, works for Orekhovo, receives goods from Tajikistan, delivers to Moscow dealers. For a trip, $5,000. The investigation tried to reach the organizers, but the courier suddenly committed suicide in his detention cell, hanged himself on a bedsheet. Guards noticed nothing. Case closed. A former employee of the State Drug Control Committee in a 2010 interview said, "We knew for sure Orekhovo controlled at least 30% of Moscow's heroin market. They didn't sell themselves. Chechens and Tajiks did that. But routes, roof, protection from competitors, all that was Silvester. We tried to get them, collected evidence for a year, reached several dealers, convinced them to testify, prepared a raid. And the day before the operation, we got a command from above, stop everything, without explanations. Later we learned, someone from high leadership called, said, don't touch. Too many connections, too big people involved. Operation was shut down. Witnesses a month later either disappeared or refused to testify. Drug trafficking brought Orekhovo about $1 million a month. Huge money. And no one dared stop this flow. Connections with politicians. The most closed topic. It was whispered about, but there was no proof. There's a version that Silvester sponsored several Moscow City Council and State Duma deputies, gave money for election campaigns, in return got lobbying of interests.
Laws on privatization, licensing, taxes, all this was adopted taking into account the opinion of criminals. In 1993, one Moscow City Council deputy gave a scandalous interview to a newspaper. He claimed at least 15 deputies received money from criminal groups, including Orekhovo, named specific names. A week later, the deputy was beaten by unknowns, broke his arm, knocked out 3 teeth. Note in his pocket, talk less, live longer. He resigned, left Moscow. Investigation was conducted formally. Attackers weren't found. Case closed for lack of evidence. Murders of competitors. From 1991 to 1994 in Moscow, about 80 murders were registered connected to criminal showdowns in Orekhovo zones of influence. The real figure, according to experts, is 3 times higher. Not all bodies were found, not all cases registered. The loudest murders. Alexander Vasilyev, Vasya Shvey, Bauman OCG Authority, killed March 12, 1992. Shot with automatic weapon at the entrance of his own house. 15 bullets in chest and head. Killers escaped on motorcycles. Viktor Nechayev, Nex, controlled casino on Arbat. Refused to give the establishment to Orekhovo. May 5, 1992. Blown up in his own car. Explosives under driver's seat. Igor Dubovoy, Dub. Chechen authority claiming the central market.
Killed July 20th, 1993. Sniper shot to the head at restaurant exit. Distance 300 meters. Professional work. Otari Kvantrishvili, head of the Party of Sportsmen of Russia, criminal authority of Georgian origin. Killed April 5th, 1994. Shot with automatic weapon at the entrance to Lokomotiv Stadium. 27 bullets in the body. Officially, the murder isn't solved, but many believe the customer, Silvester. Kvantrishvili was a serious competitor, controlled part of the gambling business, had connections in the highest echelons of power. The conflict with him began over division of spheres of influence in the oil business. Silvester wanted to enter oil. Kvantrishvili didn't let him.
Kvantrishvili's murder was demonstrative. In daylight, in a crowded place, bursts from automatic weapons. This was a signal to everyone. Who stands in the way of Orekhovo will end the same. Corruption in law enforcement. Without a roof in militia and prosecutor's office, a group of this scale couldn't exist. And there was a roof, solid, multi-level. Lowest level, precinct officers, district police operatives, received from $200 to $500 a month for not noticing Orekhovo activity on their territory, warned about inspections, lost protocols, released detainees. Middle level, department heads, investigators, their purchase cost more, from $1,000 to $5,000 a month. They could close a case, reclassify charges, organize an escape from custody. Highest level, GUVD leadership, prosecutor's office. Here it was about one-time gifts of tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. These people gave a roof to the entire group, blocked serious operations to liquidate it. In 1996, already after Silvester's death, militia Colonel Gennady K. was arrested, surname changed. During investigation, he confessed. From 1992 to 1994, received from Orekhovo about $3,000 monthly. In return, leaked information about upcoming operations, warned about arrests, helped resolve issues. During a search of his apartment, they found $150,000 cash, gold jewelry, documents for 2 apartments, and a country house. All this on a salary of $300 a month. The colonel was sentenced to 8 years. But this was the tip of the iceberg. Silvester's real patrons remained in the shadows, were never found. Chapter 10. Personal life. Silvester's double face. Common law wife, Olga Zhlobinskaya. In 1992, Silvester married Olga Zhlobinskaya, a woman 10 years younger, educated, from an intellectual family. How they met, a mystery. According to one version, Olga worked as an accountant in one of the firms roofed by Orekhovo. According to another, a mutual acquaintance brought them together. They registered the marriage not in Russia, but in Israel. Silvester received Israeli citizenship under the surname Zhlobinsky. This was a kind of insurance. In case of problems, he could leave for Israel, where Russian authorities had no jurisdiction. Olga didn't know about her husband's real activities, or rather, pretended not to know. Officially, Sergei was director of a CHOP, a businessman. They lived modestly in an ordinary 3-room apartment in southwest Moscow. No ostentatious luxury. But at the same time, Silvester had power of attorney to manage the Moscow Trade Bank, where Olga was nominal director. Huge financial flows went through this bank. In 1994, even Boris Berezovsky placed funds there. At that time, one of the richest oligarchs in Russia. After Silvester's death, Olga quickly sold all assets, closed the bank, and left for Israel. The investigation tried to interrogate her,
but she refused to return to Russia, citing threats from criminal groups. Where she is now, what became of her? Unknown. She was last seen in Tel Aviv in 2005. Then, the trail went cold. Mistress Marina. But there was another woman, Marina Sokolova, a young model who met Silvester in 1993 at one of Moscow's elite restaurants. She was 22, he was 38. Beautiful, long-legged blonde with a sculpted figure. He fell in love like a boy. Rented her a separate apartment on Kutuzovsky Prospect, showered her with gifts, furs, jewelry, cars. Marina knew who Silvester was, and it didn't scare her, on the contrary, attracted her. She loved luxury, money, power, and Sergei could give all this. They met secretly. Olga knew nothing, or knew, but kept silent. Understood that scandals and jealousy in Silvester's world could end badly. Marina was with Sergei 2 days before his death. They had dinner at a restaurant. Silvester was tense, nervous, said he felt something would happen. Marina later recalled, he had such a strange premonition. He even said, if something happens to me, leave Moscow immediately. On the evening of September 13th, 1994, Marina learned about the explosion from the news. Cried all night. The next day, took the money Silvester kept in her apartment, about $50,000, and left for Germany. Never returned to Russia. In 2010, she gave an interview to a German magazine, told about her relationship with Silvester, said she still loves his memory, still keeps his photos. He was a tough, dangerous man, but with me, tender and caring. That's how I'll remember him. Children. Officially, Silvester had no children, but there were persistent rumors about an illegitimate son. In 2005, an article appeared in one newspaper. Some young man claimed he was Sergei Timofeev's son, presented documents, photos, demanded recognition, share of inheritance. Lawyers examined the documents. Forgery. DNA examination couldn't be conducted. Exhumation of Silvester's body was prohibited. Case closed as fraud. But the question remained open. Did Silvester have a son or daughter? If yes, where is this person now? Do they know about their father? Chapter 11. Conspiracy Theories. What They're Hiding. Version about Special Services. The most popular conspiracy theory. Silvester worked for the FSB, or KGB, in an earlier period. His group was an instrument of special services for controlling the criminal world and performing dirty work. Arguments of supporters of this version. Immunity. Despite numerous evidence and testimonies, Silvester was never seriously convicted. Maximum, 3 years in early 90s, and even that suspended. Awareness. Orekhovo always knew about militia plans in advance. Raids, searches, rumors reached them a day or two before. Such a level of awareness is possible only with direct connection to special services. Israeli citizenship. In 1992, getting Israeli citizenship wasn't easy. Needed connections, money, influence. Silvester got it quickly and without problems. Someone helped him. Who? Selective killings. Many victims of Orekhovo were inconvenient not only to criminals, but also to authorities. Kvantrishvili, for example, knew a lot about corruption in the highest echelons. His murder was beneficial to both Silvester and someone at the top. Circumstances of death, professional bombing, no evidence, case unsolved for 30 years. Looks like special services signature. Version. Silvester worked for the FSB, carrying out delicate assignments. When he became too independent or learned too much,
They removed him as spent material. Counterarguments. There's not a single document confirming Timofeev's connection with special services. All evidence, rumors, and assumptions. FSB categorically denies any involvement. Version about substitution. An even more radical theory. Not Silvester was blown up in the car, but a double. The real Timofeev is alive, hiding abroad under someone else's name. Arguments. Condition of bodies. After the explosion, identification was difficult. Bodies burned, mutilated, identified by documents and later by DNA. But documents can be planted and DNA examination forged if you have connections. Closed coffin. At the funeral, the coffin was closed, officially because of body condition. Or maybe so no one would see it wasn't Silvester. Motive. By 1994, Silvester understood. Walls are closing in. Authorities are after him. Competitors want to kill. Most logical. Stage death and disappear. Money. Timofeev had millions in foreign accounts, Israeli citizenship, connections. Organizing substitution was technically possible. Rumors. Several times in the 2000s, reports appeared that Silvester was seen in Israel, Germany, Spain. Officially denied, but rumors persist. Version. Silvester staged death, substituting a double. He left for Israel himself, where he lives under another name, enjoying stolen millions. Counter-arguments. DNA examination confirmed. Sergei Timofeev died in the car. Samples taken from relatives, 99.9% match. Forging this is practically impossible. Version about Berezovsky. Boris Berezovsky, oligarch, shadow puppeteer of Russian politics in the 90s. In 1994, he placed money in the bank controlled by Silvester. Then a conflict occurred. The bank delayed payments. Berezovsky was furious. Version. Berezovsky ordered Silvester's murder through his people in special services. He had connections, money, motive. Professional execution speaks of involving special forces. After Timofeev's death, the bank quickly returned money to Berezovsky. Coincidence? Counter-arguments. Berezovsky denied involvement. Investigation doesn't confirm this version. The conflict was commercial, not criminal. Version about internal conspiracy. Someone from Orekhovo decided to seize power, organized Silvester's murder to take his place. Suspects. Dmitry Belkin, Belok, head of Odinsovo OCG, united with Orekhovo. Ambitious, tough, wanted more. After Silvester's death, took one of the key positions in the structure. Igor Sibiryakov, Sibir, controlled fighters, had connections with Chechens, could have arranged to eliminate the leader. Version. One of the close associates leaked information about the route and car to enemies. After the murder, received his share of power. Counter-arguments. All suspects denied involvement. Investigation found no evidence of conspiracy. Chapter 12. What we know for sure. Facts versus myths. Documentarily confirmed facts. Let's separate wheat from chaff. What do we know for sure? 1.
Sergei Timofeev died on September 13th, 1994. Confirmed by official crime scene examination protocol, explosives examination, DNA analysis of remains, eyewitness testimonies. 2. He was leader of the Orekhovo OCG. Confirmed by criminal case materials, testimonies of detained group members, MVD operational materials. 3. The group engaged in extortion, racketeering, murders. Confirmed by dozens of criminal cases, court sentences against OCG members, testimonies of victims and witnesses. 4. Silvester had connections with corrupt law enforcement officials. Confirmed by detention and conviction of several militia officers working for Orekhovo. 5. The murder isn't solved. Confirmed. Case is in production. Customer and executors not identified. Unproven but probable versions. 1. Murder ordered by criminal competitors. Probability 70%. Most logical version. Silvester had many enemies in the criminal world. Bauman, Chechens, Solntsevo, all had motive. 2. There was internal conspiracy. Probability 40%. Possibly someone from his own betrayed, but there's no proof. 3. Murder connected to conflict with Berezovsky. Probability 30%. There's motive. Oligarch has connections with special services, but no direct evidence. Low probability conspiracy theories. 1. Silvester worked for FSB and was removed by them. Probability 10%. Beautiful theory, but not a single fact. 2. Timofeev is alive. Death was staged. Probability 1%. DNA examination leaves no doubt. It was him who died. Chapter 13. Legacy. What remained after Silvester? In the criminal world, Silvester's death became a symbolic end of an era when criminal authorities openly controlled business, dictated rules, were more influential than officials. After 1994, cleanup began. Authorities took course to suppress organized crime. Arrests, liquidations, squeezing abroad. By 2000, almost all major groups of the 90s were defeated or went underground. New authorities didn't tolerate competitors. But in the memory of the criminal world, Silvester remained a legend. He's spoken of as the last king, a man who was able to create an empire from nothing. In culture, films and series Brigade, 2002, cult series about the 90s. Main character, Sasha Belli, partially copied from Silvester. Same path, from working guy to authority. Same charisma. Same tragic fate. Bandit Petersburg. Though action takes place in St. Petersburg, many plot lines taken from history of Moscow groups, including Orekhovo. Dozens of documentaries about criminal 90s necessarily mention Silvester as one of the key figures. Music. Russian chanson dedicated dozens of songs to Timofeev. Black Mercedes, King of Moscow, Explosion on Polyanka. All these compositions about him. Mikhail Krug, Alexander Rosenbaum, Grigory Leps, all somehow touched the theme of criminal authorities of the 90s. And Silvester was one of the main heroes. Literature. Dozens of books, documentary and fiction. Biographies, investigations, novels. New works appear every year. King and Pawn, 1998. Orekhovo, Bloody Moscow, 2005. The Last Authority, 2012. Just some of them. In society, attitude toward Silvester is ambiguous. For some, he's a criminal, killer, bandit, a man who brought grief to hundreds of families, symbol of bloody 90s that are better forgotten. For others, a strong personality, self-made man who, in cruel times, was able to rise to the top. A man who lived by concepts, kept his word, didn't betray his own. For a third group, just part of history. Neither bad nor good, product of his time. Epilogue, 30 years later. Today, in 2024, exactly 30 years have passed since that explosion on Bolshaya Polyanka. Moscow has changed beyond recognition. Those wild 90s now seem like a bad dream. But Silvester's grave at Kovanskoye Cemetery is still well maintained. Every year, on September 13th, people come, lay flowers, light candles. Some old friends, some who remember that time, some curious. The monument stands like new. Black granite, gilded letters, photo. A middle-aged man in a suit, strong-willed face, piercing gaze. Inscription: Sergei Ivanovich Timofeev, 1955 to 1994. We remember. Next to it, always fresh flowers, sometimes a bottle of cognac, sometimes cigarettes. Tribute to memory. And questions remain. Who ordered the murder? Why isn't the case solved? What do documents marked secret hide? Maybe someday we'll learn the truth, when archives are declassified, when someone in the know decides to tell. Or maybe this mystery will go with the last witnesses of that era, and Silvester's story will remain a legend, with vague facts, contradictory versions, and the eternal question: who was he really? Bandit or businessman? Killer or protector? Traitor or man of honor? Everyone will answer in their own way, and everyone will be right in their own way. Because Silvester isn't just a specific person. He's a symbol of an era when old foundations were crumbling and new ones being born. When rules were written not by laws, but by people with automatic weapons. When life cost less than a bundle of dollars. An era that ended with that explosion on September 13th, 1994. Or didn't it?